Hey guys, welcome back to Rewind Reviews, and today we're going to be talking about one of the movies that I was actually quite anticipating this year, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The sequel to 2020's Sonic the Hedgehog was released in 2022 and is the second live-action adaptation of the video game franchise starting from 1991 by Sega. Directed by Jeff Fowler, it's written by Pat Casey, Josh Miller and John Whittington. It stars a load of the old returning characters including Ben Schwartz as Sonic, Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, James Marsden as Tom Mikowski, Tika Sumpter as Maddie, Lee Majdoub as Agent Stone, plus a few new faces including Idris Elba as Knuckles and Colleen O'Shaughnessy as Tails. So if you're here for my first review, you'll know that I was quite a big fan of the Sonic franchise from 2003 with Sonic Heroes, and I've just grown up with the franchise from there. My overall thoughts with the first movie, I thought it was one of the most surprising movies that I've seen, and it was one of the most surprising movies of 2020. Not there was many movies that came out that year, but it was definitely one of the better ones that I had seen, and I think it was a really good setup for what this movie was ultimately going to be able to do. And based on a lot of the marketing that we were seeing, it did seem like this movie was going to be a lot more closer to the video games that we're more familiar with. Obviously marketing can be a little deceiving sometimes, and there was always a little bit of doubt that maybe this movie wouldn't be as good, maybe it was going to strip back a lot of what made the first movie special and they were just going to sort of focus on more fan servicey stuff. But luckily this is actually a really good sequel. Not only that, I feel like this is actually how you do a sequel. This is how you build on what's come before. It's bigger, it's darker, there's more adventure, it's more action packed, and I dare say it might be even a little better. Ben Schwartz returns once again as the voice of Sonic, and he still manages to maintain a lot of what he brought to the character in the first movie, but Sonic actually does feel a lot older in this one. He does feel like he has grown up a little bit, but there is still a lot of learning that he has to do. This movie kind of deals with him taking a lot of responsibility for what he's able to do and what he's able to do with his powers. And it actually builds on a lot of the themes from the first movie as well, especially with the way that they handle Sonic. A lot of that movie focused on how he dealt with family and friends, and with the introduction of the new characters in this movie, it definitely expands on the friendship angle, because when we first introduced to Sonic, he's literally like the only character that we really sort of see who's from his world. We get little references to the Echidnas and Longclaw, and it's not too focused on making sure that all those characters are brought into that film, so it's genuinely great seeing him getting to interact with a load of new characters as well as a load of the old ones too. So start off by saying with the returning cast, we have James Marsden as Tom, Tika Sumpter as Maddie, as well as Lee Majdoub as Agent Stone. They're like the main characters that they sort of carry over from the first movie, as well as Maddie's sister who's getting married in this movie. That story kind of takes them out of the main story in a way, and I don't want to say it's a bit of a distraction, but it does kind of go off on its own thing. I do actually quite appreciate that this movie does focus more on the Sonic story, which for me is what I wanted to see. But in terms of the actors, I think each of them are still just as good as last time. There isn't an awful lot to really sort of develop with them. There's a little bit of growth with regards to Tom and Sonic's relationship, which is actually quite a nice expansion on what's been seen, but everybody else is quite similar. I do like Lee Majdoub's character arc, where he's now opened up a coffee shop after the steamed Austrian goat milk fiasco in the first movie, and I really like how they sort of show where he sort of stands when it comes to Robotnik, and I just think some of those scenes are actually really funny, and I do think that Lee is genuinely great as that character. But he also gets to interact with Knuckles this time as well, which I think was something that was unexpected, but it actually did bring something else to this movie, and it was quite nice seeing him interacting with somebody else. But like I said, the story with regards to the sister getting married and her new boyfriend, it takes them off to a new location, so they're away from the main plot, and sometimes when it does cut away to them, I do feel like there are moments that they could have trimmed, because it does go on a little bit longer than it really should do. It does have some really funny jokes, and there are some really funny and touching moments, but overall I do think they do kind of distract a little bit from what's been going on. In the audience that I was seeing this movie with, the kids were getting a little bit restless during the actual wedding ceremony. I actually quite like how it sort of built up, and I do like the relationships that you do see sort of being developed in it, but I am quite split on those stories, so I don't mind it. Maybe if I rewatch it I may appreciate them a bit more, or I may start saying that probably could have been cut. And we also get Jim Carrey returning finally as Dr. Robotnik, and this is definitely Eggman. This is the version of the character that I've been waiting to see. He is genuinely great here once again. I think he has some of the funniest moments. I think he definitely looks and sounds a lot more like the character than he did the first time around, especially with the new facial hairstyle, the baldness, and the costume that he's got on, which genuinely does look really nice. I don't really want to get into spoilers, but I do like how they sort of show what he's been doing in the gap between the first movie and the second movie, with him basically being stuck on the mushroom planet, and it definitely does help that has sort of pushed him over the edge, so he is even more unhinged than he was before. But in terms of him being Eggman in this movie, like, this is the real Eggman. Like, when we first meet him in the first movie, he is just the sciencey guy, Dr. Robotnik, but this one he is properly Eggman with a master plan. It's really nice seeing how he has evolved into this character, and that even extends to a lot of the robots that he's using, because in the first movie he was using like these eggshell shaped things. That's how he ends up being called Eggman. In this one they do build on that a bit more, to the point where he's now got like the wasp shaped ones with the lasers, and it's just nice seeing how he has changed and evolved into a newer version of this character that is more closer to what we know from the games. And honestly, speaking of the first movie, I think this film does make me appreciate what that movie did a bit more, because that has laid down a lot of the groundwork that this movie needs. So we don't need to see why Eggman hates Sonic, we don't need to really understand why Sonic's on Earth. It's just straight into it, and it is full speed ahead until the very end. And that's why I say that this is actually a really good sequel, because it does build off of what the first movie did, and it expands it so much more. And that includes the introduction of two brand new characters that have never been seen in live action before, and the first one of those is Tails. Now, unlike Sonic and Knuckles in this one, Tails is actually voiced by the same actress who voices him in the video games, so it's really nice actually hearing one of the voice actors taking part in this. It does make me wonder why they didn't get the voice actors for Sonic and Knuckles, but I don't know, a case can be made for both of those as to why the actors were chosen that they were. But in terms of the characterisation with Tails in this movie compared to a lot of the games and the TV shows, this is a slightly younger, more inexperienced Tails, and he's got a lot of self-doubt. He idolises and looks up to Sonic, and I really like what they were doing with him. They even managed to incorporate a lot of his gadgets, and I like the way that they added just the way that he's able to interact with Sonic as well, with the way that Sonic needs to get from one place to another, and it's across a load of mountains, so Tails is literally just able to hold him, and like the video games, able to just carry the two of them across. And I really love the relationship that the two of them do develop across the movie, because Sonic does kind of look out for him a lot more. I really like how it's kind of mirrors what Sonic and Tom's relationship was like in the first movie, so it's quite nice seeing that Sonic has grown up a little bit more, and he is taking responsibility, and he is looking after somebody, but the two of them genuinely are friends, and I do really like what they were doing with the two of them. And then of course we get introduced to Knuckles as well, who's also making his live action debut. Knuckles is voiced by Idris Elba in the movie, and honestly, I think he's actually a really good choice for this role. He's not the first person that came to mind. I mean, I do remember the rumours of Jason Momoa taking the role, which I was completely on board with, but actually hearing Idris, I think he is really good in this role. He's definitely got the intimidating vibe to him, but he can be quite funny as well, and I like his sense of honour, and I think this is definitely one of the better interpretations of the character that I have seen in a long time. I really do like what they have done with all three characters, because they do feel very unique to not only the movie but from each other as well. They don't try to just do, oh well, this character does this and people like that, so let's make him a bit like that. I like how they are quite clearly defined, and I do like how they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and having both of those characters be integrated into this movie, it makes this feel more like one of the games. This feels like the adaptation that we wanted to see the first time. As I said, the first movie just had to sort of lay the groundwork. This time we can actually get the proper adaptation. This feels like the games. This feels like what we should have, what we really wanted to see. And it is really clear, especially from the marketing perspective as well, because they do show a little bit of what happens in this movie, and for Sonic fans I think this genuinely did make them quite excited about what it was that they were going to do, and I really liked how they did incorporate a lot of the game elements into this one. You know, this is a lot more of a MacGuffin hunt. The first movie was more of a road trip with Sonic and Tom. This one is very much an action based movie, and the story that they went with for this one, it really does lend itself to an action genre, because essentially what the movie is about is Sonic and Tails against Knuckles and Eggman trying to get to the Master Emerald. and it's just a race against time to try and get it before the other one does. So it does bring to mind a lot of those old-fashioned action movies, especially like Indiana Jones and things like that, and I think it is done really well here. I said in my review for the first movie that I really do think that the Sonic franchise is more of an action based genre, and this movie really does take advantage of that. I think there are several big action sequences that are so much bigger than they were in the first movie. I'm actually surprised how intense they could actually get, especially for a movie that's a PG rated today, but I think a lot of the comedy kind of balances that out. But it's actually a lot more serious as well, because it does know when to hold off and start making jokes. It also knows when it needs to be serious, because this is almost end of the world level events and stakes. So it does make sense that, like, Sonic, for instance, he's a lot less wisecracky when it comes to stuff like this. So I do appreciate that this has kind of fed into his character development a little bit more. But in terms of the action sequences themselves, I think they really do up their game with this one. There's some brilliant sequences. I won't get into too much spoiler territory for this. I will do a little spoiler video that'll go out. But in terms of what I can talk about, I think the stuff that they have shown in the trailers, there's a pretty amazing snowboarding sequence. I think they actually managed to incorporate that really well, and I liked how it sort of built up over time to the point where he now is able to do that. I think the battles between Sonic and Knuckles are actually really well handled. I think they're shot really nicely as well. It really is a lot more action packed. You know, I have said that so many times now, but it really does earn that. It is so much more action focused, and I think that is where this movie really does excel. Again, I won't get into spoilers, but the entire third act sequence is actually incredible. As a Sonic fan, I think there are so many things that they do with the third act that I was so happy by the end of it. I just left the cinema with just this massive smile on my face. I really think that the action in this movie is so well handled. It is shot well, it's edited well. I think what they did with the effects is really nice. This is where the movie really excels. But it does maintain a lot of that sense of humour that the first movie has, and I feel like this time it does fit a little bit more. I think the first movie definitely was more focused on the comedy side of things. Obviously, with this movie being more action based, it is logical that they would sort of hold off on a bit of the comedy, and that actually kind of makes the comedy a little bit funnier, because it's like they actually have sort of tried integrating a few more, I wouldn't necessarily adult jokes, but there's definitely a few near the knuckle jokes that parents are definitely going to get, kids probably won't. Honestly, I feel like the comedy, a bit like the first movie, it's a little hit and miss at times. There are definitely a few that are just but when they hit, they genuinely are really funny. Especially, even though Knuckles is quite an intimidating character, he does have one of my favourite scenes in the movie where he's just reading texts. That'll make sense when you see the movie, but honestly, like, his delivery and what they did with it is just it is really good. When I said about the humour sometimes misses, I'm not a huge fan of like really referential humour. I think that's what the first movie did an awful lot, but this one does actually make sense a bit more, because I think they do hold back off of that, but they do still include a few of those jokes. Some of them are actually quite funny, but they're not the best. I do feel like some of the more near the knuckle jokes are a bit funnier. So in terms of the direction and the editing and everything, I think this is definitely an improvement over the first movie. I think it is shot better. I think there's a lot brighter colours as well. I think it generally looks really nice, and I think it is edited well. The only issue that I do have is with a couple sequences where I feel like it does go on just a little bit too long. The film is just over 2 hours, and I think there's only really 2 scenes I can think of that could have done with a little bit of a trim. The wedding definitely could have been cut down, because it does feel like a side quest. It does really veer off to the point where you start thinking, is this genuinely a Sonic movie or not? And then it cuts back to what's going on with Sonic, and you're like, oh yeah, it is. I didn't mind it too much, but I know that there are going to be people who will get a little bit restless during those sequences, because they do go on just a little bit long. The other sequence involves Sonic and Tails visit a cabin. I won't get into too spoiler territory, but if you've seen the movie, you know what it is that I'm referring to, and it is such a strange thing to be in this movie. It really does almost echo those kind of bonus things that you'd find on DVDs. I don't mind it, because I feel like what it leads to is the bonding that Sonic and Tails do develop, but I'm not 200% on it because it just does feel a little bit jarring for me. But yeah, it does lead to quite a nice moment between Sonic and Tails, and I think I'm fine with it because it does lead to that moment, and I think showing how the two of them genuinely are connected and seeing Sonic interacting with somebody who's more closer to who he is, and it's just really nice seeing how that plays out. But as I said, the actual sequence it is really odd to the point where I was just watching thinking, I really don't know what I'm watching right now. You will be a bit split on it. I wasn't too sold on it, but I think where it leads to was quite a nice touching sequence. Like all good sequels, it does expand on where the characters end up going, and I said this in my first review, I did want to see more locations, and this movie really does double down on that. We get to see so many different places where Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Eggman all go, and it does provide something visually different, and it does show newer sequences that we haven't really seen before. Like there's a really great scene where Sonic has to cross islands, so he's like racing across the ocean, which is genuinely a really great intense scene, and it's just nice how everything sort of builds up, and it does feel so much bigger and feels more like a world this time. And I did say I really wanted to see them on a beach or a seaside, and I think they actually do include that in this movie, and it is really nice seeing something like that in this movie. As I said, I am a fan from like way back for Sonic Heroes, like the opening levels for those were the seaside hill stages, so it was just really nice actually getting to see that being realised on screen. The effects in this movie are very similar to what they were in the first movie. Sonic still looks quite cartoony at times, and I think that does extend to both Knuckles and Tails. They do genuinely look really good, and I think the designs for them are great. I am curious to see if this movie would have happened if they had stuck with the original Sonic design, because I do think that the fans who went out and supported the change kind of made this movie happen, so honestly thank you for that. But in terms of the effects, I do think that they are used really well, and I think they don't distract from anything. They never really look too out of place. There's one sequence where they do look a little iffy, and I'll get into that in the spoiler review, but it's honestly, most of the effects work in it is actually pretty good. There's a lot more detail in it as well, because there's close-ups of like the gloves that everyone has, and you can see like all the little fluff coming off them, as well as like the socks and the boots and everything. It is better than you would think. Obviously Sonic is very much a cartoon character, and they are trying to bring this cartoon into a real setting, so it shouldn't really match up, but there are sequences where he does look really good, and I do think the effects in this movie are a big improvement on the first one. Tom Holkenborg returns as well to do the music for this movie, and similarly to a lot of elements in this movie, I do think it does improve on what we had in the first film. I think it definitely sounds a lot more cinematic, and it really does add to the scale of this movie. You know, as the credits were playing and they were playing the music from the movie, and I was sitting there thinking like, this is actually pretty good. And again, it's not the most memorable. It doesn't quite have like the themes from the games. There's little jingles here and there, like it's not really part of the soundtrack, but like Tom's ringtone for Sonic is the Green Hill Zone theme, so it's just nice having like little touches like that. But as I say, it is mostly just new. It is mostly just new themes. The music that they had in the first movie wasn't too memorable. I didn't really remember the theme so well, so I can't say if like they called back to what happened there, but it does sound really good, and it does suit this movie really well. And that extends as well to a lot of the song choices that they had in this movie. I actually quite liked a few of the songs that they had in the first film, and this one really does double down on a lot of the ones that they do use. Like I did find it a bit strange how there's a sequence where they actually use a little bit of the soundtrack from Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't see why they use that particular track, because the name doesn't really resonate with anything that's going on in the scene. But in terms of how it actually is used in the soundtrack, it does sound quite nice, and it does add a little bit of extra to it, because it does kind of remind me a little bit of the music from the games. But it is a really strange choice for them to really sort of include it in this movie, because I haven't really seen many films do that. I think Kingsman and Morbius are the only ones that I've really seen actually use actual soundtrack from another film in their own. I don't know how I feel about that, but in terms of this movie, it does work and it does make sense, and the songs, the music, everything, it does work really well. And with this movie making a lot of big improvements, one of the things that they do a lot in this movie are Easter eggs, references and callbacks to previous games and the last movie as well. They are actually used really well. I won't spoil what they are here, I'll do that in the spoiler video. I really liked what they were able to do, what they used and how it was used within the context of the movie. I really did like a lot of the callbacks. Overall, I genuinely really like this movie. I think this is an improvement over the first one. I think this is a lot more closer to what we were hoping we would get, but we never thought we actually would. This is definitely like a proper adaptation of the game. The first movie was just a prequel. This is the real thing. I feel like if you are a fan, if you are a fan of the franchise, this will be a movie that you need to see. You will be really happy with it, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well. I was really thrilled with what it is that they were able to do. I also think that in terms of it being a family movie, I think families will really enjoy this. I think there's a lot of stuff that kids will enjoy, there's a lot of stuff that adults will enjoy as well. The screening that I went to see this in, there was a lot of kids along with the grandparents as well, and it was just really nice hearing this mixture of people, because that's kind of what I'm basing this little recommendation on, because the families were enjoying it, they were laughing along, and the fans were cheering and getting excited. And I haven't really seen many movies that really do that. Even No Way Home, people were sort of reserved, but it wasn't really families that were reacting, it was more the fans than anything else. This movie is for both families and fans, and I think everyone who sees this will enjoy it, which is actually quite strange because I've seen a lot of official reviews for this movie and they haven't been the nicest, and it's really surprised me to the point where I was thinking, am I just letting nostalgia sort of cloud me at all? But in all honesty, I can't think of anything that was genuinely bad in this movie. Like, the only things that I could criticise is a few edits here and there, and a few little beats, and that's really it. I don't really have much to complain about with this movie, but I don't know, critics got a critic. I'm coming from this as somebody who genuinely wants to enjoy this movie, who is a fan, and I honestly really enjoyed it. I've got to be honest, if you can go and see this on a big screen, it really does deserve it. This is a big movie that should be in like summer season, but it's coming out in the spring. It is a really great cinematic experience, and for that reason I'm going to rate this 7 out of 10. I was debating on whether or not to actually have this be an 8, because again there are very few things that I can really complain about, but I do have to try and think of this as critically as possible. But as I said, it doesn't take away from how much I did enjoy this movie. It is a better film than the first film. I do have to say really quick, without really sort of spoiling anything, make sure you do stay through the credits, because there is a mid-credit scene and honestly you don't want to miss it. I do think this is definitely one of the best video game adaptations that we have had, and honestly I can't recommend it enough. If you are a fan, or if you just want to go and see something, this is definitely something that you need to go and see. So that's all I've really got for this video today. I will get around to doing a spoiler video, because there are things that I do want to talk about and I do want to address, and I wasn't sure whether to have a spoiler section on this video or split it in half. I did do a really long Batman video where I had a review and then I went into spoilers in the second half, and I don't know if people were happy with that. I'd love to hear what you guys think, whether you want me to do a normal review and then a spoiler review, or do you want me to do one really big, long, in-depth look at things. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 does have a few things that I would like to talk about a bit more in depth, so I will get around to doing that in a spoiler video, so make sure you keep a look out for that. So that's all I've really got for today. Thank you for watching. If you can like, subscribe, hit the notification button to keep updated, it's honestly, it is a really big help. Thanks to everyone who's been subscribing and everyone who's been watching these videos. It's been really strange seeing this sort of growing a bit more and more each day, so I really am appreciating any help that I've been getting, so thank you so much. And honestly, that's all I've really got time for, so thank you for watching, and I will see you in a spoiler review. See ya.